When I say that this new Maryland government under the Constitution of 1776 would be government by the rich, I don't mean that like metaphorically or that it turned out that way incidentally. I mean that is explicitly how the government was designed. So that if you weren't rich, you couldn't be elected. Okay, so let's go through it. The new Maryland government under this Constitution will be similar in some sense to the old Maryland government in that there will be a governor, that's the executive, and a legislative branch made up of the Senate and the House of Delegates. Okay, so we're going to take each piece of that and look at how it was set up. And we're going to start here in uh, the section that describes the House of Delegates. That's the lower part of the Maryland legislature. And here, all free men above 21 years of age having a freehold of 50 acres of land, and all freemen having property in the state above the value of 30 pounds current money. That 30 pounds current money was roughly equivalent to 50 acres of land. So they're not trying to make it easier. They're like, what if you've got a bunch of wealth but not land? And that's the balancing. So all men who own 50 acres of land, 21 years old, can vote, but only voting for the House of Delegates. All men will assemble and will vote by voice for 4 delegates from their county. Voice vote, that is set up so that it's not biased against those who are illiterate. However, most people who owned property would have to have at least functional literacy. Okay, so that's to vote, right? But then who do you elect? Well, you can elect anyone who's 21 years of age and has real or personal property above the value of 500 pounds current money. That 500 pounds in 1776 is something like having property valued at like $125,000 today. Um, I don't know if all of you, even if you might be 21, have that. The Senate was not going to be directly elected by the people at all. Instead, those who met those property qualifications would vote for people who would then pick the senators. They were called electors. The later electoral college system of the United States was partially copied from this Maryland system. So the people who are eligible to vote elect electors, and then the electors, this is over here in section 15, the electors of the Senate meet in Annapolis, and they select the members of the Senate, who have to have real and personal property above the value of 1,000 pounds current money, which is something like $250,000. So the only people who can serve in the Senate are people who have $250,000. Well, that's a rough, I don't know how precisely accurate that is, but it's clear we're excluding lots of people. And then the governor. No person eligible to serve as governor unless they have property above the value of 5,000 pounds, which is something over $1 million in our dollars today. So you can't govern the state of Maryland unless you're a millionaire. And we put that in our Constitution. Poor people can suck it. It does not say that last part explicitly, but I do think that's the implication. The Eastern Shore was, I should mention this back here. It's laid out so that there will be 15 senators. 9 of them will come from the western shore of Maryland and 6 from the eastern shore. That proportionality, 9 for all this part of Maryland and 6 for the eastern shore, does not match the population distribution. It gives the eastern shore more power than they should fairly have. But that's partially because the Eastern Shore held the most Tories, loyalists, and because lots of people on the Eastern Shore wanted to break away from Maryland and become their own state. The delegates from the Eastern Shore proposed at the convention, and they wanted to put this in the Constitution, that either shore has the right to secede from the other shore. And the guys from the West were like, no, you're not going anywhere, Eastern Shore. So that didn't get into the Constitution. However, to mollify those folks out on the Eastern Shore, the Constitution did set up that there would be 2 state treasurers and 2 commissioners of the loan office. One in Annapolis and another one out on the Western Shore. This is one of the big complaints out on the Western Shore. To get to the seat of Maryland's government, I got to make it across the Chesapeake Bay. And dog, there ain't no bridges yet. Yeah. So this meant that to deal with state taxation, to deal with loans, you could visit a location yet to be determined, but it'll be out here on the Eastern Shore. Okay, so this conservative Maryland Constitution was agreed to in November 1776. They did not put it to a vote. You know what I mean? Like they didn't then say, all right, voters of Maryland, decide whether or not you want to approve this thing. They just said, okay, now we got rules, everybody. We got rules and we're sticking to them. You don't need to write down the list of all the states and all the state constitutions. Just trying to situate for you the way what Maryland is doing is like what's happening in other states, where across the states there's this thing where, okay, we're breaking away, now we got to make rules for ourselves. And so you can see there's a big flurry of this in 76 and early 77. The outlier is the Constitution of Massachusetts, which wasn't finally approved until March of 1780. And that's because up there in Massachusetts, they multiple times did the thing that Maryland and these other states did not do. They asked voters to approve it. And when they put the Massachusetts Constitution before the voters were like, nah, no, we don't like it. Do better. So Massachusetts ultimately had to try, I think, 3 times before finally getting a constitution approved. Okay, but what you need to know here from this slide is that all the states were making new state constitutions, and the events taking place in Maryland were part of that broader process. It's worth noting, though, looking across the other states, that lots of states did ban the importation of slaves. And remember that didn't make it into the Maryland Constitution. Pennsylvania banned it, Massachusetts banned it, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, Connecticut, all banned the importation of enslaved human beings into their states. The Continental Congress banned it in 1774. They had no power to enforce that law in any of the individual states, but symbolically it was important. Then, a few years later, during what's about to become a full-on war, Delaware banned the importation of slaves in 1776, and Virginia in 1778, which means by that time, Maryland was completely surrounded, Pennsylvania to the north, Delaware to the east, Virginia to the south. Maryland was surrounded by states who had banned this form of human trafficking. But Maryland had not. So when you put that context there, put it next to this next bit of context, which is that Maryland, although they did implement a property qualification to vote, did not have a racial qualification to vote. So, remember in that voting for the House of Delegates, it doesn't say white men, just you have to be a free man who owns 50 acres of land. So that meant if you were of African descent but met the property qualification, well, you could vote. And that was true in Maryland and also true in all the other states you see listed here in this revolutionary period. New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and revolutionary Vermont, which, while not one of the 13 who rebelled, was breaking away from New Hampshire and New York, who both wanted to control it. And Vermont banned slavery and allowed the right to vote without a racial qualification. Okay, next, we're going to move into the beginning of Maryland's recruiting for the war effort.